right. What's going on, good people? Hope y'all are well. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. Man, it's been an interesting one. We here in Fresno. It's coming up on 100 degrees every day. That is what it is out here. Desert temperatures for real. It'll be over 110, 115 soon enough. So, yeah. But it's good to see everybody. Seeing a few people piling in. Shout out to Malika. What's going on? Longo. What's up? LXST. What's up? We got Tay41. What's happening? Reynolds. What's going on? Lyndon. What's up? Paul. Kier. Black Gynarchy. What's going on? Shout out to Dark Power for that Cash App. Appreciate that. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel. We can continue to bring you this independent Black male thought. You see the methods there on the screen. We got the Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Of course, you can do the Super Chat right here on YouTube, or you can do the Patreon. You can become a member. Shout out to Lawrence for the Cash App. Appreciate that. You can become a member right here on YouTube. Just hit the button right there. Or you can actually become a patron, and you can support both the Onyx Report channel right here on YouTube and the Institute for Black Male Studies on Patreon. Also, I do film reviews on Patreon twice a month now, first of the month and the 15th. So if you're interested, we just did one Black Masculinist review of Thunderbolts on the 1st. And let me see, what was I going to do for the 15th? I did not commit it to memory, but I think we decided. Yeah, I forgot. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so we on the 15th, we'll do Lackawanna Blues. I haven't decided if that'll be a pre-recorded or not. I will listen to my patrons. Let me know if you want that to be a live. Otherwise, I'll do a pre-recorded kind of film review of Lackawanna Blues. Anyway, that aside. Hope everybody's well. Compassionate, what's going on? Blood boiling, Joe's, Lee's Ways, Heartthrob, Salty Balls, what's up? That name always kills me. Indigo, what's happening? Hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, I thought I'd pop in. Wanted to kind of, jump in on a couple of things that I think need to be said. I'm hoping this, as usual, will be of use to my brothers. Here. It's tough, man. As far as doing Tyler Perry movies, y'all tell me you don't want that, but then I get requests, and there's still a lot of them I've never done despite the request, so of course people are asking for Straw. I haven't watched it. I did start Netflix's Forever, but I haven't gotten past the first episode yet. Layman's Journal, what's up, man? Hope you're well. Y'all make sure you go to the Layman's Journal channel and definitely subscribe to his Patreon so you can get the full uncut film reviews that he does. They're absolutely brilliant. He just dropped a fire one, and he's about to drop another one, I want to say this Thursday. So make sure you subscribe to the Layman's Journal channel right here on YouTube and follow the prompts to get to his Patreon and sign up, become a patron there. I think you'll really enjoy it. I know I do. Shout out to Sir Anthony. Appreciate that support. Salute to you as well. But yeah, just a few things that I really wanted to drop. And this week they were they were more empirical. I thought it important to share some of the numbers I ran across. Shout out to Black Males GRP. Much appreciated. Thank you for that. But it's been real chill lately. I got about a month off before I teach a summer course. So, taking a little break, enjoying some time with the son who's home from school. He done asked me to show him how to do the family recipe for a steak. So I'll be instructing on that later this evening. So, I just thought, let me pop up here and share a few things while I could. Shout out to AB. What's going on with you? Hope y'all are well. All right. So that said, let me, take care of a little housekeeping. Y'all know how this goes. If I don't do it, it doesn't get done. So, make sure again that you support the channel so we can continue to bring you what we need to bring you. And if you haven't already, pick up the book Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry by yours truly, Dr. T. Hasan Johnson. So yeah, please make sure you do that. All right. Now, before I start with anything, y'all know, I got to start with some of the important stuff. May not spend a lot of time on it, but nonetheless important. And this one hit this week. So if you're not familiar, how do I get this damn thing off the screen? Hold on. Oh, it's not coming off. All right. There it is. There it is. All right. So Sly and the Family Stone frontman, dead at 82. Sly's former band is considered one of the most influential of all time. There goes the man himself. We just found out about this the other day. And yeah, man, we got some folks going down, man. We just, not too long ago, we were talking about Dr. Juwanza Kunjufu. And now we are looking at Sly. Shout out to Booker T for that. Appreciate that. Ray says, when you need to hear the truth, you tune in to Dr. T. Hey, man, I appreciate that. Okay, Malika says, Lackawanna is based on the actor and playwright Ruben Santiago Hudson's early life. Yep, and he's in the film. So y'all let me know if you want to come through for that. You missed a few good ones, Malika. We could have used you there. So, please consider joining in. But anyway, yeah, man, this is a People magazine article. Not going to go all the way through it, but I did want to acknowledge the brother. He died on Monday, June 9th at the age of 82. And that's a good run for Black men, most especially. That's past the life expectancy. So shout out to him. The rocker was known for Sly and the Family Stone hits like Dance to the Music and Everyday People. While we mourn his absence, we take solace in knowing that his extraordinary musical legacy will continue to resonate and inspire for generations to come, his family said in a statement. So yeah, man. So if you're not familiar, that's one of the things YouTube is good for. Go in and check out Sly and the Family Stone, and shout out to him. Blessings to the family. And peace to him. Rest in peace to the brother. So I just want to acknowledge him because seems to be that season, and you never know when any of us may go. So give people their flowers while they're here. But I always want to at least tip the hat when some of those who have put in work pass and deserve to be acknowledged. So yeah, Tiger Crane, I announced it on my last show. Yeah, Dr. Juwanza Kunjufu passed. Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to Mark. What's good with you, man? Appreciate that. He always drops a good word on that. Yeah. So anyway, now in honor of Sly Stones, y'all know how we usually do. I like to bring in some different demonstrations of what we call the Sacred Black Masculine series. Now, I've been doing this for years. It is completely at random. It just depends on what runs across my desk. But I like to highlight acts of sacred humanity on behalf of Black men, or Black men and boys for that matter, on one level or another. So I like to acknowledge when people have done their thing. And we will continue that legacy. And if you have some other examples, things you'd like to share, please feel free to send them to me. Because I like to share good news. A lot of the data we cover is pretty stark. So when we get an opportunity to share good news, I like to. So this one, another People magazine article says, heroic and selfless 12-year-old boy rescues his toddler, brothers, and grandmother from house fire in Virginia. You see the young man there. You can see the fire right there on the right. Lighted. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Make sure I go through a little bit of this. So this is Ramir Parker. I think that's his name. It says 12-year-old Ramir was at home with his grandmother and younger brothers when he discovered a fire in the downstairs of the property. Fire crews responded to reports of a structure fire with visible flames and heavy smoke at their home in Petersburg, Virginia at around 8:51 a.m. on Tuesday, June 3rd. Ramir grabbed his younger brothers and helped lead everyone out of the house. Petersburg Fire Rescue and Emergency Services said his selfless actions were nothing short of heroic. So this 12-year-old young man saved his family. Shout out to him. You know what I mean? We want to acknowledge that. And any other such acts of heroism, You know what I'm saying? And we need to make sure that when we actually are in proximity to these young men, that we extend a word verbally, a conversation, an affirmation of some sort. And if you're in a position or feel so inclined to mentor, brothers that, pique your interest and suggest that they're able to, really take what you have to say to heart and do something with it. I'm a huge advocate for mentoring. You know what I mean? This week, as a matter of fact, I've had several of my mentees who have gone on to do their things coming through. It's always good to reconnect. So it is a blessing, man. It feels good to be able to do it. So I'm an advocate for it, and I highly recommend you brothers do so, because I know the kind of brothers that watch my show are often accomplished in their own right across occupations, across genres, across whatever fields of interest we're talking about. But most of the brothers I run across have some mastery of something. And so I would nudge you to find a mentee to pass some of that knowledge on to, especially when you consider either that you've had it, you've benefited from some type of mentorship, or you didn't, and you know how much you could have. So either way, make sure that you take an opportunity out to do this. Mark says, I've been mentoring 2 young black men for 20 years. There it is. Yep, there it is. Shout out to Tiger Crane, became a YouTube member. Appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, okay. Black Males GRP says, just for the info, there are now multiple orgs claiming to have black males agendas as of January 2025. Interesting. I've definitely got to check this out. Yeah. So, you got a couple of URL links. Make sure you send them to me. But thanks for that. I'll keep an eye out. Anyway, so shout out to this young man. Just wanted to acknowledge him as far as the Sacred Black Masculine series goes. Just a couple of acknowledgments to get us started on the right foot. Now, I'm afraid we do have to shift to some harrowing information. I just kind of have to. So I started out positively, but there are some other things that we are going to actually wait. Hold on. Okay, wait a minute. We got one more. But this one's bittersweet. So I wouldn't say it's positive or negative. So we started out positive. This one's a little bittersweet. And then we got some things to get into that are what they are. So let's see. How do I pull this one up? Where'd she go? Okay. Yeah, here we go. All right. So hopefully the sound works. I'm just going to click it for a second. Tell me if you can hear it. Okay. If you heard that little bit of sound, please give me a 1 just to let us know that you're on track. Ghetto user, appreciate that. This is for the tray. Peace to you, Doc, and Brotherhood. Appreciate that. Micah, what's up? Yeah, okay, so we got a 1. All right, so this one, like I said, is definitely bittersweet. More bitter than sweet, but I do want to acknowledge this brother. This is a brother in Oakland, or at least a teacher at Castlemont High School. So y'all check this out.
Mixed emotions about surviving. And I'm also grateful for the gift that he gave me.
Nina Woodruff is talking about the moment her partner, Marvin Boomer, pushed her to safety before he was hit by a fire hydrant following a crash in Oakland on May 28th.
I just kept saying, baby, get up. Baby, get up.
Boomer, a beloved Castlemont High School teacher, was killed.
Without a doubt, he saved my life. And it's not surprising because that's how he was with me. I called him Mr. Wonderful.
Woodruff says she and Boomer were planning a future together, but that was all cut short while they were out for a walk on East 21st Street. A car that had been pursued by CHP lost control moments after the CHP says it called off the chase.
This is extremely tragic. I know my brother, and he did what he had to do to save someone's life.
Boomer's sister and parents remembering him as a kind, gentle soul with a smile that could lift anyone's mood and a tireless dedication to improving the lives of his students.
He was a genius in doing that, letting them know that they matter.
The boomers taken aback to see the hundreds of people who turned out for a vigil last Friday at the site of the crash, which they believe should never have happened.
It's irresponsible to have chases in neighborhoods, period.
Why do you have to endanger lives?
I feel mixed emotions about surviving. And I'm also grateful for the gift that he gave me.
Nina Woodruff is talking about the moment her partner, Marvin Boomer.
Yeah. So, as I said, definitely bittersweet, but nonetheless, the brother deserves his acknowledgement. Saving his lady's life is what it is. Heroism comes in many different moments. You never know who will have it when needed and who won't, So shout out to the brother for having it and saving her life. But I wanted to acknowledge that because, again, these are the kinds of acts that Black men commit every day. And even though they make the news, they often don't go viral. People don't talk about it. But when somebody says Black men don't protect, when somebody says Black men aren't whatever, these kind of stories get forgotten about. So I want to remember, I want to acknowledge, and I want to support brothers who are doing what brothers have always done, whether they got any acknowledgement or not. And I want to highlight and reaffirm to you listening to this that these are human acts that we commit, despite how most of the time people go and ignore it. And I don't want to let that happen. So shout out to that brother, the work he did. Shout out to Salty Balls again. Appreciate the donation. He says we have to watch out for orgs with black male talking points as they are likely to moderate our message. Let's make sure we vet them and they actually have Black men working there and they are not agenda types. Okay. Here you. Shout out to Dr. Thunder. Hope you're good. Hope you're well, good brother. Yeah, I always catch this show on a bathroom run very early in the morning, so I don't often get to watch the whole thing. But shout out to Dr. Thunder over there. Excellent father, husband, putting it down. I think last I checked on Mr. Z's channel, they're calling you Pope Thunder. So shout out to the Pope or the Bishop, whichever one you are most comfortable with. Corey, what's up? Let's see here. All right. Shout out to Jet Black. Y'all check out the Jet Black channel when you can. Glad you came through, So yeah, we just wanted to kind of start by acknowledging a few things. Now this one, I'm sorry to say, is this one's tragic. This one's tragic. So let me just kind of point that out outright as we jump in. I'm kind of going in random order. In some respects, I wanted to start with the Sacred Black Masculine, but there are a few things that are just going to come at you in the order they come at you. So anyway, now this one actually is connected to a lot of information, so bear with me. So this young man here, hopefully you guys can see him. Yeah. So what you're looking at here is a young man who had two mothers, one biological and, his mother's girlfriend. And unfortunately, they deleted him. Now, this is just a post. I'm going to read an article in a moment, but this post provided some interesting information that I thought was useful. So I wanted to start with this. So it says 8-year-old Martonio was abused by his mother and her girlfriend. He stayed in timeout, standing in the corner while his siblings were able to eat and play. Martonio was also locked in the closet and beat with a crutch as punishment. He was beaten, choked with an extension cord, and denied food. He was only 35 pounds when he died. So I reiterate, he's 8 years old and he was 35 pounds when he died. The mother called the police to report him missing, but he was in the attic the whole time, wrapped in a trash bag inside of a sleeping bag. When the police brought dogs to search the home, they would not let the police in. They packed up the other kids and fled. Police came back with a warrant to search the home, and found the dead body in the attic. The mother and girlfriend turned themselves in the next day. The girlfriend was sentenced to 15 years. The mother will spend the rest of her life in prison. The autopsy report determined Martonio's death was homicide caused by asphyxia by interior neck compression. There were signs of systematic abuse. Martonio suffered blunt trauma to his head, as well as severe malnutrition and dehydration. Yeah. Yeah, this is what we're looking at. Now I'm going to go to the article and see if they have some additional information. Here we go. So let's enlarge this a bit. Make sure you guys can see it. There we go. All right. All right. So, a woman sentenced to life for role in 8-year-old Martonio Wilder's death. This is dated June 5th of this year. Columbus, Ohio. Jonna Lowe had little to say in a Franklin County courtroom after pleading guilty to her involvement in the murder of 8-year-old Martonio Wilder. The boy's body was discovered, as I said, in a trash bag in the attic of his home 6 hours after his mother, LaShonda Wilder, reported him missing. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 15 years for charges of murder and gross abuse of a corpse. She was initially charged with murder, endangering children, felonious assault, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. And there's the couple right there. Biological mother on the left, girlfriend on the right. Now, Lowe, LaShonda's girlfriend at the time, admitted to beating Martonio, and an autopsy revealed he was severely malnourished and dehydrated at the time of his death. Prosecutors described the boy's life as brutal. Multiple witnesses and some family members told detectives that Miss Wilder treated Martonio different than her other sons. They spoke about unusual punishments for Martonio, including holding a weighted ball and walking up and down the steps while naked and restricting food. Witnesses also stated Martonio was always hungry and stole food from other homes he was at, including his school. Yeah. As I said, he was 35 pounds at the time of his death and suffered severe malnutrition, dehydration, blunt trauma, and asphyxia. And apparently, LaShonda Wilder is set to go on trial July 15th. Her mother, Mary Johnson, also faces charges of obstruction of justice in the case. So it looks like that, so upon being asked, she either misrepresented herself, more than likely, or obfuscated the search for her daughter. So it looks like the mother's going to be going down for that as well. The grandmother, technically. Shout out to Rush. I appreciate that generous offer. Thank you. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with. So Martonio lived a short life, died a very brutal death. And one of the reasons that I wanted to share this as well is just to also share some data. We like to be empirical in this space, and that's one of the reasons I'm here, which I'll talk about more in a moment. But here, so check this out. This is the Children's Bureau, an office of the Administration for Children and Families. Right, this is on the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services website, Administration of Children for Families, and from there. So this is the Child Maltreatment Report. This is usually an annual report that's extended. I will be posting this in the description box for this video after the show is over, but I like to put it on the screen, and I will put the link in the chat as well for anybody that might want to visit it. Shout out to Gregory for the super sticker. Appreciate that. Shout out to Growth Talk with Kofa for the support. Peace to you, good brother. Make sure y'all support the Growth Talk with Kofa channel. When you get a chance, subscribe, check him out. The brother's always dropping critical information. But anyway, the child maltreatment reports you can actually look at for every year. I want to say back to 2014. Yeah, they produce annual reports that cover everything from abuse to child homicide or filicide. And we're going to look at some of the data that came off of this last report. And I've reported on this before, so this is not new information necessarily, but I think it's necessary for us to go through. All right. So I just wanted to start with the source and where you can look at what I'm about to show you in more detail if you so choose. Okay, do it this way. There we go. So this is the child maltreatment report for 2023. It's the last one that was posted. Let me see. All right. So some of the data that came from the latest report, and this relates to the young brother who passed away. We'll start with the basics. So as you can see here, this is the section on perpetrator relationships. So it just kind of gives you a little bit of context as we go through the data. I'm only going to show you 5 or 6 charts or so, just to give you a sense of the state of filicide as it relates to Black children Shout out to Cynical Optimist. Hope you're well. GC, what's going on? Gregory. Anyway, so it says the FFY 2023 data shows 89% of victims are maltreated by one or both parents. The parents could have acted together, acted alone, or acted with up to 2 other people to maltreat the child. The parent categories with the largest percentages of victims are victims maltreated by a mother acting alone, 37.2%. Victims maltreated by a father acting alone, 24.6%, and victims maltreated by both parents, 19.4%. So we're going to look at some of the tables, but I just wanted you to see straight off what the data is starting to show us. And this is not groundbreaking in the sense that we know women tend to be caretakers of children. So it stands to reason that, we would see things like this. So this is one of the first charts we're going to look at, child fatalities by race or ethnicity, 2023. And as you can see, out of each racial group, you can see first for the second column is the child population, size of the population. And then you can see in the third column, the number of fatalities, right? The number of fatalities. Shout out to HD Hip Hop. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Now, the thing about it that's important to look at in this particular frame is you can see in terms of the white population, there's a child fatality number there, about 581. And as it says at the bottom, this is based on data from 45 states. Data is from the child file. Counts associated with specific racial groups are exclusive and do not include Hispanic, even though it does have Hispanic on there. But it's talking about other groups being non-Hispanic. Anyway. States with 30% or more victims, race or ethnicity reported as unknown or missing are excluded from this analysis. This analysis includes only those states that have both race and ethnicity population data. Dashes are inserted into cells without any data included in the analysis. Anyway, so here we go. So, you look at the white population of children, there's over 29 million, nearly 30 million. There have been 581 child fatalities. And when you look at the Black community, we have close to 9 million children, but child fatalities is 540. It's the second highest number of fatalities, right underneath a population that is more than 3 times larger as far as just the children alone, right? So that means that ours is extremely high as far as that's concerned. And it's sad, but it is what we have to look at. So that's one of the first things, Let's continue. So this one deals with child fatalities by sex as of 2023, and what you'll find more often than not is when it comes to child fatalities, boys tend to be the ones that die the most. So to the good young man that we were just reporting on, unfortunately, this is consistent, okay? So there's slightly more boys than girls. This number changes dramatically as kids get older, and, quite dramatically, as a matter of fact. But anyway, so you can see the number of child fatalities in the third column there is 942 boys, 657 girls. That's 58.7% of child fatalities are boys and 40.9% are girls. So again, these are all just snapshots. And if you overlay them on one another, you kind of get a sense of what the trends are in regard to child fatalities. This one is by age. And this is something I've been saying for the longest. Usually what you're dealing with when it comes to this is, the more vulnerable the population, the more they tend to be, predated upon, right? So here you can see below the age of 1 is where you have the highest number. And we're going to look at why in a moment, but just wanted to give you a picture, right? So the younger they are, the more vulnerable they are, the more they tend to suffer. And of course, the good young man fit in the 8-year-old category. You can kind of see the breakdown right there. But anyway, and you also have maltreatment types of child fatalities. Now, this is fairly consistent annually. Again, you can go back and look at all these child maltreatment reports going back to 2014. What you generally find is neglect is the number one form of child fatality, followed by physical abuse, right? Psychological mistreatment is in there, but the third category is medical neglect, right? But the top one is usually always neglect and physical abuse in that order, right? So again, now in terms of the young man being dehydrated, malnourished, I think he was dealing with both physical abuse and neglect, right? But again, it's consistent with the data. Yeah, child fatalities by relationship to their perpetrators. And you can kind of see right there. So total number of parents, 1,269. But the largest population, as I read when I talked about the perpetrators earlier on, is mother only. Right? So part of the reason we have these conversations in these spaces is because as Black men, most particularly, for the last 50 years, we were told in every way, shape, and form that we were, we were the cause of all the community's ills. We were monsters, we were boogeymen, we were murderers and rapists and everything else under the sun. And it's not to say that Black men are not guilty of anything. That's not the goal of my work. But it is to say, when we really look for accuracy, these kind of things get swept under the rug. So in other words, when Black men are at fault, it's for the world to see. When they're not at fault, they're still at fault. And when others are at fault, it's swept under the rug. So it's not about, I'm not, contrary to what people may think, I'm not about just randomly looking for ways to attack, women or whatever, but I do point out what is generally not known and swept under the rug. And we can see with the young man I just talked about that this is not just a chart with numbers on it. These are very real situations. Okay, so we'll get to that a little bit later. So that right there just kind of gives you a sense of what we're looking at. So again, shout out to that young man, but I wanted to kind of clarify what he's going through. He's not alone, unfortunately. He's not alone. So young, Black, male, and in this context, it's not just by his mother, it's by his mother and her partner. Right? So textbook as it is what it is. Now, I was going to do one, but I think I'm going to skip that just because, after reading those numbers, I don't feel like going to the next video. But I'll say this. This is something I wanted to kind of point out because there's been a lot of conflict lately going on, a lot of attacks being levied at the men in this space and whatnot. And I kind of wanted to explain something. Now, I started doing this work on YouTube in about 2018. And I think, as I've said before, I was introduced to the space by Obsidian. And that's one of the reasons I have him on my show from time to time. It's really an extended thank you. He was the first. He reached out to me, and I appreciate that. And the reason that that's important is because, one second. God dang it. Okay. Sorry about that. One of the reasons that that's important is because I was looking for space to do certain types of work, right? I've been examining and studying Black men even before I knew I was. When I initially finished my doctorate, a lot of my work was really abstract. It was really theoretical. And I was hired at Fresno State mainly to teach hip hop. But it really wasn't hip hop that I was interested in, but I didn't know that at the time. I was actually interested in studying Black males, but this is the life of a scholar. You think you know what you're going to start out at, and you do your dissertation work, and then it just continues to evolve years after you've completed your dissertation. So this is normal, right? But I really began to look into studying Black men more and more, and I started writing my blog, the same blog where you can find the Black male political agenda, and we're going to go to that because there's a new blog piece on there I want you to check out. But that's kind of where I started to push. And when I looked for spaces where we could discuss the gender dynamics in the Black community outside of the rubric of Black feminism, I didn't find many spaces. I didn't find any spaces in the academy willing to do it. I didn't find it in social circles. We had been socialized in many respects to revere Mama to such a degree where any type of criticism, you either met with a confused silence or hostility by even raising the question, right? In the circles that I had studied in since my teenage years, from nationalism to Pan-Africanism, there were no spaces to really criticize Black feminism. There was historic publications at different point in times that may have levied certain critiques here and there, but an open, ongoing discussion, no. And this is where I get to the manosphere. Now, I'm told I'm manosphere adjacent. I'm fine with that. But nevertheless, one of the reasons that brought me here, because I was going to say after being invited by Obsidian, I was kind of pulled into it by BGS. And he kind of showed me, he mentored me in terms of how to set up. I didn't know anything about the technology. You can see my channel is far from the most technologically advanced channel. I don't do a lot of that, but he showed me kind of, what software to use and kind of showed me how to put it together, and actually did a couple of years on Interlight Radio, Black owned online radio station. I still, publish my shows there. And that showed me a lot about how to conduct a show. So shout out to Brother Jamal, shout out to BGS that showed me how to do this and kind of brought me into this space. And he did it in a real funny way, BGS. He I wrote a blog piece and I think about 500 people read it. And then he read it on his show and it got like 5,000 views. And he just kind of looked at me like, you getting this yet? You're going to have to take it from writing to, this. So I appreciate him for that. But what I found was this was the only space willing to have a conversation. Now, I would go on to publish several works in this area where I examined the history of feminism. I examined the gender dynamics, the history of those gender dynamics in the Black community from a Black male standpoint. I found there were a lot of scholars that would shake my hand, proverbially speaking. They would email me, text me, sometimes at a conference, shake my hand in the hallway. But as far as being seen publicly, no. I would get a lot of thank yous. I get a lot of brothers, even professors, who would listen to my work online, sitting in their cars before they walk in the house. Some would buy my publications under the table, but not tell anybody about it. There were a few brothers that would actually make it assigned reading in my coursework, but not a lot. Not a lot. It was very, it was considered highly controversial. And one of the reasons I came to YouTube was because I refused to publish probably for a good 5 years. I didn't stop writing, but I stopped publishing outside of my own blog because I found that many of the publishing companies, as well as the journals I was applying to, were so concerned with catering to feminists that the very subject matter I was interested in, before I even wrote it, before they even could read it, was considered so offensive, it wasn't even worth publishing. And a couple of the publications I got through were just horrendous. I mean, horrendous. It was difficult trying to get things through because the training we had was to pedestalize feminist discourse to such a degree that it was beyond questioning, beyond reproach. Even Black male feminists, and there were many that I went to school with, and many I was urged to study at the behest of some of my feminist colleagues, mostly female, would send me to. The Black male feminists I would read, they would basically just repeat the same talking points on intersectionality. It was the same talking points, almost word for word. And one of the things I noticed, in order for them to maintain their status, they never pushed back. Not pushing back for the sake of pushing back, but for the sake of accuracy, for the sake of context, whatever it may be. And this is, and understand when I'm saying this is a natural thing that happens when human beings build on an idea and try and create something. There is always some form of criticism. It doesn't have to be hostile. It doesn't have to be an attempt to tear it down, even in the sense of expanding it. But what I found with Black male feminists is that they would mostly never push back. They would never recontextualize or raise question. It functioned much like many women's studies departments do, women and gender studies departments do. It functioned more like a religion than it did a field of study. Because in the academy, you're supposed to be able to question, and it doesn't have to be a hostile engagement. But what I found is when it came to feminism, it was very much like being an atheist in a church. And that's how you were treated, as a heretic, a blasphemer, right? This is how you were treated if you question these things. And not only do we still see it in the academy to this day, we still see it on social media. Anybody who questions these dialogues is automatically placed in a category of being a misogynist, being someone who hates women simply for questioning. And this is what I've noticed. So the only space that I actually could go to and have certain conversations was this one. And I appreciate you brothers for engaging me, because you engaged me in earnest. This channel, it's not about hating anybody, girls, women, anybody. It's not about hatred at all. It's not about trying to tear people down. It's about actually figuring out what Black males go through. And initially, the first, I'd say 5, 6, 7 years of my channel was about creating a vocabulary that was specific to Black males, so they can articulate their own experiences beyond the limited vocabulary we've been given from other areas that don't quite fit how we're talking, what we're talking about, so on and so forth. We needed a new vocabulary, one specific to us, not one that we were handed down like a child, being given his older siblings' clothes or something. We needed a specific one, a custom-made one. And that's one of the things that this channel has been focused on for years. Now I'm at a point where I'm seeing brothers speaking up in ways I've never seen before, and I'm happy to see it. So I haven't been pushing the need for vocabulary, because I think we've done enough of that. And then a few years ago, about 2020, we started to shift the discussion into politics, and we started to, really begin to imagine what are the kinds of policies that would actually help improve the quality of life for Black boys and men. And the reason we did that is, after years of study, analysis, and discourse, what we found is that much of what Black men grapple with in the Black community is policy-based. And if you don't understand that, that's one of the reasons I wrote my book. Shameless plug, but go actually check out Solutions to Anti-Black Misandry, because the purpose of the book is to explain why most of the things that Black men are grappling with and having difficulty with are a product of historical policy, excuse me. And so I just kind of wanted to put that in context in terms of why I'm here and why I talk to the audience I speak to. Because one of the things I'm noticing is this kind of beef that I've been seeing over the years is happening between different groups of Black men, especially in regard to Black feminists and their perspectives on the space. But there are other things that are happening at the same time as well. There's very much a class struggle taking place. One of the things I will say about the Black men in this space that I've been working with and dialoguing with for the last 7 or 8 years, this was an organic conversation built from the ground up. What I'm starting to see now are configurations of highly educated men who are trying to build something from the top down. And much of their issue is the nature of the conversation that Black men are having from the ground up. It doesn't suit their class sensibilities. It doesn't suit how they've been trained in the academy to speak. It doesn't suit the value systems of feminism. And personally, I think it's gross, but that's kind of what's taking place. It's very much an attempt to bully on the basis of class. It's really problematic. I tried to have this conversation with probably the greatest cross section of brothers I've ever run across. Black men from homeless to running banks, successful businesses to mom and pop shops, jobs, 9-to-5 blue collar brothers to entrepreneurs to, professors. This is the best cross section of Black men I've ever run across. And so there's an extremely diverse dialogue. But much of the time, brothers in this space are just dismissed as incels or unintelligent, or, it's almost like an 8th grade mean girl set of criticisms of Black men in this space. But nonetheless, I've found a great cross section of Black men that have so many different experiences to bring to bear. And I just kind of wanted to explain what kind of undergirds the work I'm doing and why, because it's you brothers who've been supporting the channel for years that have actually fueled me to want to continue to do this. So that said, I want us to keep pushing, because this is one of the things that I find is a bit of a problem. Hold on. We are so concerned in many ways with trying to please that we don't actually have the conversations I think we need to. Y'all check this out. I hope you can hear it. I'm just going to let it play this time, but give me a 1 as soon as you can hear it. And if you can't, give me a 0 and I'll have to start it over. This is, I think it's a couple minutes long, but check it out.
So what do you do as a Black man when the snow bunnies come hopping? my queens to hear me. Listen up. And I want my young kings to hear me. But I hear black men say, the white woman is more cordial. Listen, she's less aggressive, more accommodating, more supportive. You know what I say? Even in cases where it may be true, if you are a privileged white woman, why wouldn't you be more supportive? Why wouldn't you be more open? Why wouldn't you be less aggressive? The white woman's personality towards the black man is a result of the privilege she experiences in the larger society. The black woman, you say, she got an attitude. She angry. She wants you to have everything right. But look at what she's been through. The black woman has raised our children in our community by herself for the last 75 years. So I understand that she's not going to be as trusting. And guess what? I don't want her to be in the beginning. I don't want them to let any brother who walk in their life sweep them off their feet. Because guess what? The hardest thing for a black woman to do after she's been hurt is to let her guard down and let you hurt her a second time. So we need to earn that trust for our women. Earn that openness from our women. Because guess what? One thing is for sure, and two things for certain. Every black woman in this room, deep down inside, every one of them, from the future lawyer to the future doctor to the future educator, they want to submit to their king. But what we need to understand is that, calm down, stop being thirsty, calm down, stop being thirsty. At ease, my queens. The black woman, who is the original woman, she is designed by God to only be able to open up her heart and submit to a man who's stronger than she is. And the problem with a lot of black men, not you, but a lot of brothers, they are weak men. She cannot submit. So you got to make sure you bring in your alpha, your spiritual alpha, your mental alpha, your financial alpha, because every woman desires to submit, but you got to be at an energy that will make her open up to that. Black power.
Now, whether we do this because of how we've been socialized, and many of us have, most particularly, cliche as it sounds, if you've been socialized in a single mother-led home, you are socialized to do this. To provide emotional labor to women to such a degree that they are not held accountable. And you don't even know how to hold them accountable. It doesn't even cross your mind to do so. We've learned to chivalrously take responsibility for what they do, what they say. This is what we do. Now, in the content creating, community, you not only have that socialization, but it's rewarded by material gain. Number of subscribers you have, the number of donations, whether you're talking about content creating or a church or hell, even the Black Panther Party, which was majority female. When you cater to women, most particularly in the Black community, Black women, it comes with funding. It comes with reinforcement. It comes with being patted on the head. These things all go together. To be critical of that, even lovingly critical, comes with a strong rebuke, a dismissal, accusations of being everything from a traitor to, as I said before, misogynist. But if you can pander well enough, you can secure the bag, as they say. But the long-term impact of this is problematic. Now, I said earlier that this was the only space I could find where you could actually have certain conversations, and I meant that. But if you really go back historically, and this is something BGS and I talked about a couple of weeks ago, the manosphere, the Black manosphere, as we call it, technically shouldn't exist. If the spaces in the community were functional, critique should be something that is just a part of our everyday existence. It damn sure is when it comes to Black males, whether they're children, grown men, or elders. Black men have never stopped receiving critique. That's a norm, but it's a one-way critique. Black women are generally not critiqued. Even when they're extremely out of line, they're generally not critiqued. And because of that silence, one of the things that we've started to notice is that it had to manifest. I used to teach Well, when you're a scholar, you have multiple sub areas of research that you're involved in alongside your primary area, right? So as I began to evolve into, Black male studies, some of my sub areas would be like hip hop studies, you know what I mean? Things of that nature. One of them was gang studies. And one of the things I used to talk about in terms of Black gangs is that many of them, not only did they pop up in a time period where we actually had no civil services like police officers and judges and courts that operated on our behalf or acknowledged our humanity. So in many respects, the gangs were actually part of the communal defense mechanism. But here's the thing, the reason I bring that up, the component of our community that was functional in regard to, constructing a sense of manhood and passing that on to the youth, something that we see or we used to see in these rites of passage kind of programs, they were developed to suit a need when it came to developing manhood in young men, right? And in part of that community of men, necessary criticisms would be extended to whomever they needed to be. But we didn't really develop that in the Black community. And because it's been stamped out in silence to such a degree, you get the Black manosphere. Now, the Black manosphere is not solely preoccupied with critiquing women, contrary to popular assumption, but that is a feature of it. And I'm saying it only came about because of its purposeful removal from other aspects of communal development, social development. We didn't have it. Women were not to be critiqued at all. And you can't function like that in a community. Now, part of the reason that was such is because, for the most part, our women had support. They had support from the state. And I've talked about this for years. What we call the gynocracy is really the result of everything from government organizations and institutions to NGOs, providing resources to women that Black men didn't get. And over time, that created different behavioral patterns in women. It even created an entitlement because the safety networks, the what do you call it? What's that called? The safety nets in place for women over the years didn't apply to Black men. So many women developed a superiority complex. These are what complicated the social dynamics between men and women. I'm going to do a video soon on an interview that took place about education. It was, I want to say it was a white man, a Black man, and 3 women talking about how boys are not learning in schools. And the conversation they had was so problematic. They refused to acknowledge the mechanisms that were put in place for the last 40 to 45 years, 50 years really, on behalf of girls in schools, even at the K through 6 level, that boys did not get, in environments that were overwhelmingly female. And the culture of learning was female influenced. And that meant that boys were measured against a female model that was never discussed aloud. And when they failed to meet that model by not learning and operating as girls in those classrooms, being graded by grown women, people were surprised that they didn't do well. So my point here is when we talk about the kind of framework of how Black men and women have dealt with each other, we refuse to acknowledge the resources that produced the behavior that many Black men complained about over the last 50 years. Now, it's not to say we didn't have complaints prior to that, but it blew to a disproportionate level afterwards. The entitlement is something that we just, for the most part, had difficulty talking about, to the point that we didn't. This is why when you saw the rise of Black feminism in the late 70s and the 1980s, particularly over mainstream television and film, Black men never had an organized response. Individual men had certain responses, from rappers to, the random scholar, but you really didn't see an organized response until the last 15 odd years. We were not trained to do that. And that's why this space came to exist, because it came to exist to fill a need that nobody wanted to acknowledge, except for many Black men themselves. But we shamed each other for wanting that need to be addressed. So there was conflict from the beginning. There are plenty of people that didn't care about the shame because they wanted to get to the root of the problem, how it came about, and how it continues to function. And in this last 6 months, we've seen a radical shift in something I didn't see we'd see changed in my lifetime, but it is happening. And I talked about that in January. First show I did then, we talked about the failure of the gynocracy, but I'll not go off into that tangent. That tangent. If you're interested in that, go check the show out. I think it's the only one I did in January. But either way, this is kind of where we are in this conversation. The men that are going back and forth are, for the most part, representing 2 factions of the Black community amongst the men. One trying to maintain the social order, pandering to women, catering to them for profit and doing so for pats on the head and maintaining that structure. Now, there are other, in my humble opinion, is actually more concerned with what's happening on the ground, whether it's nice, whether it's not, whether it's ugly, whether it's beautiful. What is it? What is it on the ground? What is it that men are dealing with? Right? And at the same time, challenging stereotypes, which is something we're going to do in a moment. The ongoing need to do it, because that's another part of this discourse nobody wants to talk about. The long, ongoing legacy of representing Black men as nothing but stereotypical monsters. You can't have a history of that going back to slavery and then somehow think it's not going to play into the relationships between Black men and women. So Black men becoming monsters in that discourse strangely reflect the same tradition of Black men being considered monsters since slavery. And we're not going to acknowledge that at all. That has no place in this. When academic feminists with doctorate degrees consider Black men to be the same monsters that white ethnographers referred to in the 1800s, really? We're not going to acknowledge the similarity there, even in the language. Somehow that just gets swept under the rug and dismissed. Shout out to Dr. Gamble. What's good with you, man? As an educator for the last 25 years, from K to college, every time I sought to obtain funding and support for Black boys and men, I was shut down officially or promised funds that never came. Exactly. What I'm talking about here isn't just about fighting on social media. I'm talking about structural issues. I'm talking about resources that are policy-based, that did not go to Black men and boys in any significant numbers. And many of the women that gaslit us and told us that they don't know what we were talking about when we tried to bring that up. But one of the things we found is that in the last month or so, I've never seen this many women coming out talking about the biased history of treatment for Black men and the need for the community to come together. Well, you know, it's useful for that discourse at this point because so many people are losing jobs that now they see the benefit of working with Black men. But prior to this last few months, when Black men would talk about this legacy of institutional exclusion, silence. As long as there were resources for Black women, silence. So I take issue with it. And so I kind of just wanted to take a moment to kind of explain to you how I come to this space and why. Because as far as I'm concerned, the space only exists because the failure of different institutions in the community that should have been the repository for Black men's critiques and positive outlooks on the community. And critique is not necessarily negative. It can be done in a very loving fashion. But the reason it takes the intensity it does is because it was stamped down, swept under the rug, and silenced for generations. Black men that wanted to speak were silenced. Again, this is why I came to YouTube and I stopped publishing for 5 years, because I was excluded from the mechanisms. I was excluded from the institutions that normally one would publish with because the topic was considered unpalatable. Now, here's the interesting rub. By the time my channel reached 5 million views, strangely enough, now the very publishing companies that wouldn't publish anything I wrote, several years ago, were asking me to publish. That book I told you I wrote, the one I'm telling you to go out and check out, yeah, that was on. That's on Rutledge. Anyone had nothing to do with anything I was talking about before that. So we are actually creating our own space, and it has reached past escape velocity, whether people like it or not. It has popped up in areas that nobody expects it to have popped up in, and obviously people don't want to credit the conversations that's been going on in this space for that, but it has. So you can critique the guys here all you want. Conversations have gone global. And now and this has been going on for the last 8 years. I've had men reaching out to me from all over the world: China, South Africa, Australia, Canada, Alaska, telling me their experiences. And of course, all over the US, but telling me their experiences, Mexico, you name it. Countries from all over the world where men are taking cues from the discussions that Black men are having, in as much as their experiences mirror some of the things we're talking about. All over the continent of Africa, brothers are reaching out. And it's necessary. Let me get to some of these super chats and we'll jump into the two things I wanted you most to see in regard to how policy needs to be something you use. So shout out to Catacombs, course, they come when you popping. Yeah. Even conferences that I stopped going to, all of a sudden they wanted me to come and present. But when I wanted to present a few years ago on some of the topics I was introducing, nope, they fought tooth and nail to prevent it. So I find it interesting. Let's see. I think I passed one. Where'd it go? Okay, passed a few here. Shout out to Brandon. He says, Doc, thanks for reminding us to listen to our own needs rather than worry about what others think about us. Indeed. Appreciate that. Let's see. Growth Talk says, we've been trained in trying to please our way since childhood. Exactly. And you learn this as a child. Your very well-being before you can walk, before you can talk, is based on how well this person who's literally feeding you from her body perceives you. But we're going to act like that has no influence on how we engage women today. Okay. Shout out to Inspired Truth. Gifted 1 membership. Appreciate that. Gregory, appreciate the support. Says, what is swept under the rug leads to panderers like Deontay saying things like all black men are responsible for bad actors. Yeah. He made a statement about how most black men can't handle rejection. I want to know where he got those numbers from. Because as far as I'm concerned, one thing that black men, and men in general, but especially black men, learn from a young age is rejection, particularly as young men. Rejection is actually a norm. For men, you actually have to work to achieve some degree, whether it's status or whether it's accomplishments on other grounds, but you have to achieve in order to move past rejection. But that's part of manhood in many respects. So this idea that somehow most men can't handle rejection makes no sense to me whatsoever. Rejection is part of the game of life. Now, obviously, there are individuals who can't handle it, but there are all kinds of men that deal with rejection every day. Matter of fact, one of the conversations I'm noticing happening in social media is women questioning whether they should initiate discussions with black men on the street, because they're looking for partners and they're looking to date and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things they've been debating back and forth is whether women should initiate. But you know, one of the reasons that women hesitate to do so? Severe fear of rejection. See, men are socialized to experience rejection. Why? Because it's a social expectation that we initiate contact with new women. Right? And men have been talking about this, for centuries, even my lifetime, like from the 60s onward. I'm not that old. I'm 70s child, but if you listen to the music, it was, how do you woo a woman? How do you seduce a woman? How do you engage her in conversation? These were things that men studied. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. The love songs, all of that media was situated around how do we approach and initiate contact. And you got to understand the skill it takes to do this. You got to walk up to a woman you've never met before and say some shit that she might find interesting and that she's never heard before. And you're doing this with someone you've never met. Otherwise, and this was common as well, especially in the 90s, women would laugh at you and dismiss you. I grew up in an era where women would tell you, you're too dark. Or I've heard that before. Get away. And if she's in a pack of people, trust me, it could be a problem. But these were the spaces that men had to cultivate a voice. Now, men that are withdrawing from initiating contact for other reasons, even as young as 13, 14 years old, before they've even gotten out the gate, they're starting to reject this. And people really underestimate why. They underestimate the breadth of what men are responding to. It's not just about being frustrated with women in terms of rejection. There's a lot going on there that goes beyond that. That's what the show has been preoccupied with for the last 8 years. It's much bigger than that. But it is a feature, right? And, rejection is something that we learn to experience. We learn to deal with. It is part of manhood. There are always going to be individuals that can't handle it. But I disagree with the notion that this is something somehow that most men have a problem with, and somehow you got to be responsible for the cat that doesn't. No. If anything, women fear rejection far more than men because they're not socially expected to do it. We're used to it in many respects. But there are reasons men are pulling away from it. And much of it has to do with their social value. It's changing. It's increasing. It's moving in different directions. And they're finding support from other places in the world, from other spaces in the world. And it's changing the dynamics. But anyway, that's a whole nother show. Shout out to HD. He says, thank you for the work you do. I think this is... Okay. Yeah, I think that's the last one. All right. let me get to the first of two things that I want to talk about in regard to letting the data work for you. Let me see. Skip through a few of these. I had other things I wanted to go through, but one problem with working on Facebook is, stuff does what it does. All right. So this is actually a tweet, and shout out to Dr. Curry, Dr. Tommy Curry. If you have not read The Man Not, you have missed a movement that has continued to go underway. It is parallel to the Black Manosphere, called Black Male Studies. Where did it go? There it is. All right. Okay. Now I will pull the chart up individually in a moment, but let me just start with Dr. Curry. All right. So you guys should be able to see that. All right. So what he's retweeting, he's actually retweeting a gentleman who posted the chart. So I'll show you the chart in a second. It just kind of summarizes the chart. Here, I want to focus a little bit more on what Dr. Curry says, and then we'll look at the chart. So he says, I find it illuminating how social scientific research never seems to confirm gender theory, right? Never seems to confirm gender theory. Let's look at what he's talking about. This is coming off of a CBS. Hold on. There we go. All right. Let's get rid of this and go here. All right. So you have CBS information drawn, I want to say, just for accuracy. Okay, it says this is based on a sample of almost 23,000 people, right? So that's pretty strong. And one of the things it shows you, and this is what Dr. Curry is referring to, he's talking about the last election between Harris and Trump. Now, we've heard I want to say since Kamala Harris was announced as the front runner from the Democratic Party, we heard critique, and I mean the day of, that Black men were somehow going to ruin this election for her. Obviously, this came from Black female pundits, but it became popular in social media, and Black men became the face of somehow voting for Trump. Now, I know there's a lot of brothers that support Trump. There's a lot of brothers that don't. There's a lot of brothers that are indifferent. And this chart actually takes that into account, believe it or not. The blue is for Harris. The red is for Trump. And the little gray in between the blue and red for each bar are actually those that voted for the couch, as they say, right? All right. So here you go. So you can see men and women, right? The top chart. You got men voting for Harris at 42%. Men voting for Trump at 55%. That's across race. Women, of course, 53% for Harris, 45% for Trump. But let's skip down to Black men and women. Now, we already know that Black women vote Democrat to the highest degree, and you can see it here for 91%, right? And then you can see what roughly is below 9% women who voted for Trump. If you look just above it, Black men find themselves, and shout out to Robinson for the cash out. Black men find themselves having voted for Harris at a 77% clip. Now that, I think, is going to continue to drop as older men begin to die off. And I hate to say it that way. But younger men, I think, are raising different questions, because when you look at the history of the left, questions about to what extent they've catered to Black men is a worthy question, and I don't think they have been. There's really been no major party, in my assessment, that's really acknowledged Black men in any major way, and that includes the Democrats. When the Democrats talk about the Black community, they mainly focus on Black women. Black men become an afterthought, and yet we vote Democrat on a consistent basis, and regardless of gender, whether we're talking about Harris or Hillary, right? We vote to the second highest degree out of all demographics, except for Black women. And if you look at the red bar at 21% of Black men who voted for Trump, we were the second lowest demographic to vote for Trump. Now, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because we were not only told that we were going to be the cause of Harris's failure, that we were, the failure of the Democrats being elected. We were going to be. This is pre-election, right? But then afterwards, we were still blamed. There was still somehow this sense that 21% was the cause of not only her failure to be elected, but the Black community's failure to properly support her. It all fell on Black men, right? And this is one of the things that I think is going to end up being another Black masculinist turn. And if you read my book, you know what that means. The Black masculinist turn can be anything, but anything that really inspires Black men to question what they've been doing, right? We've been voting Democrat to the second highest degree, despite that we suffer greater voter disenfranchisement than any other group, including Black women, right? If you look at the incarceration rates, the relationship between that and voting, Black men go through far more than most groups, except maybe Native Americans, as far as being able to actually vote. And yet we still vote to the second highest degree in this capacity. And what do we get for it? Now, I'm not saying the right is necessarily going to give us a damn thing, but I can say if you actually, ask a community to support you to this degree and then ignore them, the younger generations in particular are going to really start to withdraw. And sometimes it won't even be a clear-cut argument. It'll be a withdrawal simply because your needs are not being met. And we have actually been articulating what those needs are. Now we have the 19-point Black male political agenda. The latest point we've just added, right, is reparations for the GI Bill, right, from World War II to Reagan, really. But anyway, my point being, as Black men voted the way we were told we wouldn't, even though if you look at the history of the Black male vote, this is fairly consistent. We've still been shit on. There were no apologies. There were no acknowledgments that Black men didn't. I think there was one pundit, I can see her face in my head, but her name escapes me at the moment. She didn't apologize, even though she was one of the biggest voices, our sister. She's initially born in Africa, prominent TV talking, whatever. I don't watch a lot of that, but I forgot her name at the moment. Joy Reid, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think it was Joy Reid. She did acknowledge that Black men did not vote the way she thought, but she was one of the ones that early on was talking about Black men and how we were going to vote. So she didn't apologize, nor did anybody else. She just acknowledged once that Black men did not vote the way she thought they would. But if you look at the history of Black male voting patterns, this is consistent. And my point in bringing this up is simply to say, even when Black men do what they were asked to do, pressured to do, shamed that they were not going to do, there's no apology, there's no acknowledgement, there's not even a thank you. There's merely really a low-key fuck you. That's what you get. And the professional talking heads, even the Black male ones, silent. Remember when Obama came out and shamed Black men before the election by telling us what we weren't going to do and how much misogyny and sexism was at play and how he was so disappointed in Black men? The stats for the last few elections have been this consistent. As if he didn't see this. Was there an apology? Was there an acknowledgement? Was there a reconsideration of how Black men are perceived? No. It was a low-key F you. And we'll likely hear it all again in a few years, right? This continues. But what people don't take into account is that Black men are starting to really grapple with apathy. Because at the end of the day, it's almost as if regardless of what you do, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be acknowledged. Now, I'll share with you real quick what I said when I reposted this Tommy Curry tweet. I apologize if it's a little too small. All right, let me get this stuff off the screen. All right. So I said, no, that's the wrong one. Nope. Sorry, a little rusty. Let me pull. There we go. All right. So this is, I reposted this on Facebook. I said, the contempt from the left for black men in the last presidential election was reprehensible. And despite it all, there was no call for it. Black men voted for Harris to the second highest degree, and the second least for Trump, second only to black women. But listen to the left, and you'd think black men single-handedly elected Trump and denied Harris. Ultimately, black men's growing discontent for progressive voting has more to do with their disregard and fantasies of wanting to emulate Trump. Because that was one of the things that they started to tell us, right? The reason black men did this is they all want to be Trump. You know, it's almost like they were waiting for black men to start wearing orange, hair pieces and walking around in suits and trying to talk like him. That was the treatment that black men got. If they didn't follow the line of logic that the black community is approved for following, the idea was that you somehow wanted to emulate this rich, wealthy white man. And then, of course, the subtext was, well, we heard about him in hip hop, ergo, all black men want to be Trump, right? That was the idea behind it. But nobody wanted to consider that black men are actually growing more and more discontent with how they're being treated amongst the left. I've said this before. The right may see you as niggas. The left sees you as men, and thus you're a monster. The hostility that black men get come from each side on one level or another. The left has not welcomed black men despite black men's voting patterns. So instead of actually acknowledging that there may be a logical reason why many black men are starting to withdraw, the hostility toward masculinity, the framing of masculinity in and of itself is inherently toxic, and then that being mixed with a century of stereotypes about black male monstrosity, being about us being some type of black male monstrosity, those two things converged, and black men got the receiving end of it. Hated by both sides. But nobody wants to consider that being a reason that black men are withdrawing. We just want to be Trump. And this kind of oversimplification of black males' motivations, rationale, reasons for doing what they do is somehow acceptable. Instead of actually talking to black men who can articulate this, they're going to talk for us and tell us why we do what we do, whether or not it suits our actual perceptions or not. This is what they're going to do. And somehow that was accepted. Now they're spending over $20 million trying to figure out what men think. And the question could be asked, how much of that is actually being spent on black men? Who knows? But anyway, we continue. Disregard from Democrats, Republicans, third parties, and even singular demographics such as black women have fueled discontent from black men regarding politics. And if it doesn't change, more and more black men will continue to let go of the mainstream social order. It's not about them moving more right wing. It's about them apathetically moving more away from everything. This is what we're facing. This is really what we're facing. We're facing extreme apathy from not being heard, not being listened to. And beyond apathy, black men have begun to operate on their own without seeking approval from anyone. Now, those numbers are clearly low, but they're growing. And I think that's the scariest part for a lot of people. But instead of actually trying to understand it, they just denigrate. Shout out to Afro Nerd. Says, hey, Dr. Harbinger, was that root piece stating black men were the white people of black people more fantastical than a Marvel movie? I remember that. Ghost Rider, appreciate that. Says, white women get their proxy power through their men being at the top of the social economic hierarchy. Black women get their social status power by keeping their men at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Agreed. But then again, they were not only socialized for that, they were materially rewarded for doing so. Even in the academy, one of the things I noticed a decade ago is that if black women as feminists could come out and describe black manhood as a new type of monstrosity, their careers would go through the roof. Not so with black men. Shout out to Dante. He says the wall of indifference. Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to show you the data on some of the voting patterns, because I wanted you to see how even when black men do, as they were damn near shamed into doing, not to say that was their motivation for doing it, but it happened nonetheless. Was there any type of positive view extended to black men? I mean, y'all tell me. Shit, let me know what I'm missing. At the end of the day, I don't think so. And this is what I mean when I say let the stats fight for you. Shout out to Randall for the cash out. Let the stats fight for you. That's why I have Luke Cage as my thumbnail with the bullet holes on the sweater, because this is representative of how black men live. a lot of different spaces, not just in terms of the larger white society and what we grapple with in terms of that, but even within our own communities. This is the treatment we have to deal with while being told, while being gaslit, that our experiences aren't really our experiences, and we're just misogynists that can't see through women's eyes. And when we do, somehow justice will rain from the skies, and the sun will shine through, and we will all elevate to a new level of being. Absent men's experiences, perceptions, conclusions, analyses, none of that is relevant. Just shut up and let the women do it. This is the kind of basic idea that we've been given. And there's some people who are paid to do so. There are some people who are financially rewarded to do so. But they're also culturally rewarded, patted on the head, so on and so forth. You saw Dr. Umar, UCLA. You want to bet on the gender dynamics in the room? Or you giving pastor at a mega church, preaching to single women how men are at fault for their singlehood. You want to guess about the numbers in the audience and who he's catering to and why? As if the material reality that undergirds it doesn't exist? That's what we're going to do? Okay. Well, here's the second piece. Now, this is based on a blog piece I wrote. And I wrote it, it's very short. And it's very short for a reason. It goes back to what BGS taught me in 2017. People don't really like to read, so it is what it is. It's entitled, it's written June 7th, written June 7th. It's called Are Black Men Really Abusive Monsters? Now, before I go through this very short piece, I want to tell you why I wrote it. The reason I wrote it is I was having a conversation turned into a slight debate. And his brother, who's a professor, and he had made a statement that, the numbers of men that kill women are just extreme and monstrous. Now, first and foremost, any death in terms of intimate partner homicide is one death too much. Let's just get that off the table. Nobody should have to die at the hands of their intimate partner. Shouldn't. One of the things I've noticed is that when it comes to Black men or men in general, we've kind of taken a position where we accept this idea that, we're monstrous rapists who kill women in droves. And that was the quote that I remember when Tommy Curry showed up on Yvette Carnell's show years ago. Brilliant interview. Tommy was dropping bombs. And one of the statements that came from the comment section was, Black men are killing Black women in droves. And then we started to hear these weird little statistics, right? Black women are being killed every couple hours. And I started to think about how many generations have been browbeaten into believing that this is what men are. And this is all that men are. Cross race, for that matter. And this is one of the successes of the feminist movement, right? Because they have a toehold in this. They understand that society feels empathy for women who are abused or killed. And that can translate into political traction. They understand this. Translates to funding. This is one of the reasons that they began to push back against men who were actually starting to document their experiences with intimate partner violence and intimate partner homicide. The stats are slow coming because they don't want to put that emphasis on men. Now, there are stats that are available, but they're not largely, tiered. They're not supported, acknowledged. They're not. They're downplayed because you're talking about real dollars and resources that go to feminist organizations. This is one of the reasons that you don't actually see any kind of safe houses for men. It's laughed at if you actually bring that up. I mean, the closest thing you're going to find to a shelter for men who are dealing with intimate partner violence is a prison or underneath a bridge. It's a dismissible idea. And one of the reasons it's dismissible is because it's a threat to the resource base that feminists have grown accustomed to since the late 1960s. They were the ones to spearhead this question of abuse. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have, but I am saying that when they eliminated men from the discourse and barred men from being able to participate and be acknowledged, that set the tone for these kind of discussions. So I thought, let me just write this piece. So one of the things in this discussion I had with this brother, I said, okay, you say that men are killing women, and I'm paraphrasing, in droves. I said, what % of men are killing women? He didn't answer. And this is not about attacking him. But I thought to ask that question for a reason, because I wondered how many men actually had ever looked up what percentage of men are actually committing these acts. So I'll share with you this short piece, and do with it as you will. Let me put the link for it in the chat. You can just go to newblackmasculinities.wordpress.com, and it is the second piece there. You can check it out for yourself. But I'll read through it a little bit. And as I said, it's fairly short. It started out as a Facebook post, and then I added a little bit to it. But I wanted to keep it short, so you can see it. So it says, when it comes to intimate partner homicide, IPH, I've noticed that feminists have controlled how this discussion has taken place for decades. Data is presented in very specific ways that obscure raw numbers. In fact, they rarely discuss raw numbers at all. And what I mean by that is if you look up intimate partner homicide, what you're going to get are all kinds of rates. Black men kill black women more than this, and 6 times more than that, and 10 times more. You'll get rates all day. Rarely will you get raw numbers. And I found the same thing to be true for grape about a decade ago when I actually was looking for raw numbers, because at the time I was doing research on how many black men were experiencing grape in prisons, and I was curious about how that measured up to women's experiences with grape outside of prison in the larger society. And I had a hard time finding purely raw numbers at that time looking for that. So I just wanted to put that in context. But anyway, I'll continue. And the perception that men are killing women at random across the board seems fairly rampant when it comes to the discourse on intimate partner homicide. Social media, the internet, and my students at the beginning of the semester are exemplary of this. And when I asked how many IPH victims there were in a given year, no one could seem to answer. They can only give rates sometimes, right? But consider this. In 2020, there were approximately 2,059 women killed by men in 2020. Right? These were not intimate partner homicides. These were men who murdered women. So it's likely the IPH numbers would be significantly lower, probably like 50% lower. But anyway, I just took the raw number of men who killed women. Now, mind you, these are men, they may not have even known these women. They may have been strangers. We might include car accidents where the man lived and he hit a woman in a car, or maybe even out of a car, right? This is all men who killed women in 2020, 2,059. In fact, average annual deaths based on recent data, 2018 to 2021, the CDC reports an average of approximately 998 intimate partner homicides of women per year, based on the AI overview. By comparison, about 6% of the 17,970 males murdered that year, which is about 1,078 in 2021, were victims of intimate partner homicide themselves, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And I leave the link for you to check out yourself. I can see that these numbers are always underreported, but I should also mention that male intimate partners killed by women's male family, friends, boyfriends, or even hired assassins are often not categorized as IPHs, intimate partner homicides. They're not categorized that way. In the US in 2020, there were approximately 164 million men and 167 million women. So that means 0.000013 men killed women in 2020. That's about 0.0013% of all men. 0.000012 women killed by men in 2020. That's about 0.0012% of all women. Right? Now, we'll come back to that. As for black folk, Whiskers NVDRS Violent Deaths Report says about 200 black men and 340 black women died by intimate partner homicide in 2022. Now, these numbers are fairly consistent. I have another blog where I want to say somewhere between 10 and 15 years, I listed the number of men and women that were reported to have died. And these numbers are reported by state, right? So about 200 black men, 340 black women died of intimate partner homicide in 2022. Now, there are 48.3 million black folk. Approximately 20 million are men, 21.5 million are women. Obviously, this includes ADOS, FBA. It includes other groups that are deemed black, but so do the victims report. So it's kind of all in there. Right? You can see the first chart there. Yeah, this one is a death report for, if you look at sex, there you see for females. So black female victims of IPH, 340 is the death count, right? Out of a population of over 16 million. Okay? And then you can see the same report for males. Okay? Not controlling for LGBT or interracial racial relationships, that means 0.000017, that's 0.0017% of Black women were killed by an intimate partner via IPH. 0.00009, oh, I'm sorry, 0.000009, that's 0.009% of Black men were killed by an intimate partner intimate partner via IPH. This means, and this is the crux of the whole piece, right? This means that nowhere near even 1% of men kill women, and nowhere near even 1% of women have been killed by men in the United States. And the same can be said for the Black community. I want to highlight that, because if you've been told your entire life that you're nothing but a monster and you come from a demographic that kills Black women in droves, these numbers are sobering, because nobody ever tells you what the raw numbers are. Nobody ever tells you what the raw numbers are. And again, these numbers are reported by 45 states, I believe, over the years. But this is it. This is what we're talking about. Contrary to what Black feminists on the internet will tell you, Black men are not killing Black women in mass, nor are they being killed by intimate partners every hour of the day. Intimate partner homicide is an important issue that we need to study in earnest. Just be careful to not let people's political agendas obscure the numbers to such a degree that we lose context. Men commit more acts of murder than women, but they're also subject to murder in far greater numbers. My point here is that men are not rabid dogs, despite how some really want to make them such for their own political advancement. And as a consequence, men, Black men especially, are measured by the actions of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of men, and thus permanently seen as monsters. That's it. And I left it short because I wanted people to share it. And I wanted you to be able to look it over yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that any of those deaths that took place are unimportant. I want to clarify that. It doesn't. There's no IPH that should be supported. It's ridiculous. And if you are in a position where you're even contemplating it, seek some help. If you are somebody who is being subject to intimate partner violence in your relationship, again, not only seek some help, but consider removing yourself from the dynamic. That old trope that feminists used to say in the 1980s, if he hits you once, he ain't gonna stop, that applies to women as well. And women have a whole different framework involved. Most of the time, they know they're not going to be held accountable for it. This is one of the reasons that they can be extremely violent. Not only is there no social expectation that women be abusers, despite the statistics around their abuse, they know that much of the time, at best, they'll get their hands slapped for it in court. They don't really suffer repercussions. Not really. And they know this, which is what promotes a lot of the entitlement behind it. So the unmitigated gall to be violent and expressive because she can is a real thing, because they know that nothing, for the most part, is going to happen to them. Very different when it comes to you. That said, if you are in that kind of situation, whether you've told anybody about it or not, I would highly urge you to consider removing yourself from the dynamic. But at the very least, seeking out help. So I don't support IPH in any form. I'm not suggesting at all that I do, and I'm not suggesting that these deaths are unimportant. But what I am saying is, for men who've been told their entire lives that you are monsters and that women are just being snuffed out by men at every turn, I wanted you to have some context for what we're talking about. Not so you can dismiss the issue, but just so you can actually frame it on some realistic foundations. You know what I mean? That's really what that is. That's really what that's about. I just wanted to provide that. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for giving me your time tonight. Research the data for yourselves and let it work on your behalf, because much of what's been discussed about Black men in general is it contributes to a very long history of mischaracterizing Black men as less than human. And that tradition hasn't ended. Matter of fact, there's probably more Black folk that participate in building on that tradition than ever. And it's much easier to do on social media. So I defend Black men's humanity, Black males' humanity in regard to boys and men. And I hope that this has provided you some kind of resource that you find some value in, because I need more of you to speak up and make sure that we continue to humanize each other and provide each other with support. I wanted to play the video clip from Cam Newton's, one of his recent shows, but I don't want to get hit with a copyright. So I will find a way to post it. I already put it up on Facebook, but there's a moment where he's having a conversation with an actor who's talking about being maligned, being mischaracterized as a Black male actor, and the stereotypes that go along with how he's perceived. And he has a moment where he actually, starts to cry, just to get up and walk out the set. And shout out to Cam for letting him do it, for just sitting and being present and supporting him. What I'm saying to you is we have to be able to provide that resource to one another, because we don't. Well, I shouldn't say that. We don't to the degree that I think we should as Black men. We've been trained to compete with one another for all kinds of things. Status, women, it is what it is. Not going anywhere anytime soon. But we can embellish on the aspect of our culture as men to reinforce need to support one another, to extend a hand, to make a phone call and make sure your boy is all right, or even someone you don't know that well, because you never know, man. I have made phone calls that I was told were the reason somebody didn't delete themselves. I have gotten phone calls at very low moments where I wasn't sure what I might do. Just going through life. Be a resource to one another. We need more of it. And I do want to hear more men in this space actually start to talk like that. I do. I know the space, kind of supports an ongoing, competitiveness where everybody wants to claw at each other and fight with each other. And we all want to be spectators to that shit. It is what it is. I'm not going to speak ill of it. It's not going anywhere. But I would like to add that we could also create a dynamic where we produce content to support each other. Now, that was one of the reasons I thought this space was created, and it's one of the reasons I continue to support it. I hope you will as well. I want to thank you for coming through tonight. Hope you guys are good. And make sure you share with me in the comments your thoughts. Let me know, what you'd like to add, and I'll holler at y'all soon. Peace. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.